Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you to David and to Louis and the team here at the festival. It's my first time in Prague, and I like it very much. So thank you for the invitation. I'm really, really glad to be here. I'm going to read some poems from my chapbooks, Corpses and Grotesquerie, for the apocalypse. They feel like good poems to read, the right poems to read right now. And all these poems were very heavily influenced by the absurdist Daniel Harms, or Harms, if I pronounce it correctly, and Russell Edson as well, the American prose poet. But I guess I'd like to actually dedicate this reading to Daniel Harms, whose commitment to shush, to nonsense, never waned in the bleakest of times. And I would also like to dedicate the reading to the Ukrainian people and to actually anyone who is having to deal with terror or horror of any description on a day-to-day basis. So, do you have my books with me? I'm going to read from my phone so I remember which poems I gave to David to translate. It's safer that way. Let's do that. So, and I think I just about have enough charge on my phone, so that's very positive. So I'm going to start with a selection of miniatures from Corpses. One. Corpses dangled from hanging basket hooks around the village. The lost and found at the station contained ears, tongues, and body parts. The reality show was getting all of this. It was really great stuff, but the production team were feeling increasingly anxious. 3. She dressed 2 of the corpses in grandmother's petticoats and smeared lipstick over their faces and teeth. She moulded Play-Doh to her favourite corpse's thumb to replicate grandmother's, which was permanently swollen, having been caught in a mangle sometime in the 1950s. 10. The corpses fell from the ceiling of the cave entrance like a beaded curtain. They were wrapped in what can only be described as Christmas tree netting. 11. The stepping stones were frozen corpses. There was no other way across the lake. Their hearts quickened as they could hear the dogs now not so far away in the distance. 13. She knew she had made a fool of herself, said too much, shown too much, made too much of the once limp, now finally stiff morsel that had enticed her here in the first place. Well, at least she knew her secret was safe, she thought, unaware of the CCTV cameras in every room of the funeral parlour. 18. The survivors used the corpses of their friends as blankets, and the band leader tried to get some kind of sing-along started, but only one of the 7 of them joined in, so they didn't get much momentum going, and morale, if anything, plummeted. 19. The mortician made an excuse and left the room when the family came to view the corpse, for the deceased friends had thought he was sleeping and had written dickhead on his forehead in permanent marker. 20. Don't know what it was about this one, but the Grim Reaper couldn't move on. He had to be prized from the corpse by his assistant, who was female and much better at the job. She was embarrassed for him, really, and had seen it coming. Just fucking step down, for fuck's sake, she muttered as he coughed and wept and spluttered, slowly allowing himself to be peeled off the pool attendant's body. 29. Oysters and champagne, corpses by candlelight. Esther and Graham had thought Teresa had said corsets by candlelight, so were a little shocked at the open caskets when they arrived in their lingerie for what they understood was a swingers party. 30. It was an initiation. First you had to spend a night with a corpse, then a week, then a month, then a year. It would have been all right if they'd at least switched up the corpses, but for those with commitment issues, this setup was particularly cruel. So that's a little taste of corpses. So let's go for some Grotesquerie for the apocalypse. I've got a little lucky penny floating around in my wine. I don't know how it got there, but there we go. I'm finding it quite comforting. Very short poem, Gruel and Piano. Gruel and Piano. A bowl of gruel and a grand piano fell in love. Sex was only possible via telepathy. In the gruel's mind, it was about the slip and the slop of it, the hard edges and vibrations. Whereas for the grand piano, it could see their lovemaking laid out like notation on a handwritten musical score. Not in Kansas. You step out into your back garden and find yourself in a mud wrestling ring with your opponent coming straight towards you. You start to shake a little. It turns out this is your trademark. They call you Jemima the Jelly Harrison. You have waist-length blonde permed hair. Your opponent has a mullet, enormous biceps, and a tan to die for. By the quantity of Frankie Says Relax t-shirts in the crowd, it's clearly the 1980s. This is always the era you'd hope to come back to, but fantasise more of a cocktail bar or top of the pops dance floor scenario. As you're trying to recall the wrestling moves that must have got you this far in the championship, a Mad Max-esque aircraft lands, its blades chopping you into pieces. Suddenly you aren't in the 1980s anymore. It's more like the 1930s, and at the bottom of your bloody legs and feet now miles apart are some ruby slippers. Okay. Torso. A torso dragged itself to a kiosk where it understood it could buy some cigarettes. It had no head, so wasn't sure how it was going to ask for cigarettes, let alone smoke them, and with no brain was running on some kind of instinct. The girl working at the kiosk, which did indeed sell cigarettes as well as a wide range of newspapers and magazines, was perturbed when the torso appeared with its macabre snail trail of blood and innards. But Lord knows this stump could use a cigarette. Anyone could see that. And it was looking to pay by cash rather than card. She saw no problem with carrying out the transition. Sorry. Okay. Ghosts. Ghosts. Ghosts on E. Ghosts wearing nothing but mankinis under their Victorian clothing. Ghosts. Ghosts whispering filthy lyrics of Prince songs to the prudish while they sleep. Ghosts dressed in sequins and leather snorting bone dust off the edge of a gravestone. Ghosts. Ghosts travelling back in time to watch other ghosts undress when they were regular humans. Ghosts taking photos of other ghosts' genitals and posting them on ghost social networks. Ghosts. Ghosts cheating on other ghosts and boasting about it to cadavers. Ghosts giving golden showers and laybys to ghosts wearing ghost urine protective clothing. Ghosts. Ghosts rolling around naked on a bed of souls. Ghosts suffering badly from anger arousal. Ghosts. Ghosts sucking on human limbs like lollipops while sporting bunches. Ghosts with a horny entourage hungry for ghost ass. Ghosts. Ghosts haunting people for days on end on amphetamine binges. Ghosts having unwholesome intentions towards other ghosts in the room, discreetly opening bottles of poppers, slipping relaxers into other ghosts' drinks. Ghosts. Ghosts blackmailing other ghosts into sexual favours by holding their copy of the film Ghosts for ransom. Ghosts moving through walls to the soundtrack of There's a Ghost in My House by Ardeen Taylor or sometimes The Fall. Ghosts not spending too much time arguing about which version, as they're both pretty good. Ghosts. Okay. This poem is called Split. An egg hatched and a Polish lowland sheepdog telling the most boring story anyone had ever heard emerged. After 17 excruciating minutes, he was put down. Whilst expiring, he gave birth to a 17th century Russian Streltsy who was so anxious that he made everyone else in the room feel unbearably awkward. In 8 minutes 40 seconds, he was put down too. As he took his dying breath, a miniature majorette marched out of his mouth, twirling and throwing her baton in the air whilst whistling an upbeat version of Foreigner's I Want to Know What Love Is. The audience was split on this one, so they cut her in half, exterminated one half but not the other. Her living half mated with half a semi-professional tap dancer whose performance had also divided the gallery and gave birth to a high-class male escort who had talons for ears. The audience found this amusing but a tad contrived. At that moment, the executioner's back opened and a quail flew out. The audience reached for their guns, shot it, and spent the rest of the afternoon taking pictures of the corpse. This poem is called The Shelf. A girl became obsessed with a shelf. Her mother thought it was getting ridiculous and asked the girl's father to do something. Talk to her, she said, show her other shelves so she realises there are alternative ones with just as much to offer. Her husband was a skirting board, so did not reply, let alone take action. Taking matters into her own hands, the mother started illuminating other shelves around the house to make them tantalising, accessorising them, hanging decorations from their corners and so forth. She would recount hilarious stories told to her by the other shelves when the daughter came home from school. The girl started to suspect that her mother was also in love with the shelf and that they were having an affair. Without wanting to involve or upset her father, but consumed with jealousy, the girl smashed up the shelf and set it alight in the back garden when her mother was out. Her mother returned and could see what was done. She became hysterical and started rooting around in the flames for pieces of the shelf. It was during this process that her mother caught alight and burned to death. After the event, the daughter meticulously separated the ashes. She made it her life's work. Okay. Executioner. A woman wanted sex with an executioner. She'd read all the literature available on executioners so that if she ever encountered one, she would seem knowledgeable, which she hoped might lead somewhere. It was a method she had already proved in past encounters with a dog groomer and a blacksmith. The woman put the hours in. She downloaded various transcripts of interviews with executioners, watched YouTube clips of actual executions along with movies featuring executions, her favourite being Pierpoint, starring Timothy Spall, who she was already a fan of due to her time playing Barry in All Vie de Saint Pet Tribute Act. In order to really get a feel for it, she executed a few of her colleagues, a couple of Deliveroo guys who looked knackered anyway, and some adulterers looking for discreet friendships. Ultimately, she knew she had to get stateside to score herself a hottie, so she dragged the All Vie de Saint Pet Tribute Act out of retirement for one more show to raise the necessary funds to emigrate to Arkansas. So I've got a couple of poems to finish on, which are from my kitty ring sequence. So my kitty ring sequence, I was very interested. I've been to Japan, a real big fan of I find it fascinating, the culture in Japan, and I'm very interested in how, I got asked to contribute to a conference around responses to cuteness, creative and critical responses to cuteness, and they were interested in the counter aesthetic of cuteness, which is a grotesque, which is kind of my area. So I thought it was very interesting how Japan they do these extremes so well. They've got this kawaii culture of cuteness, but then they've got this incredible history of ghosts and also the horror, incredible horror films and essentially horror. Japanese horror is another thing they do very, very, very well. So I thought it'd be very interesting to see what would happen if you do an experiment if you sort of mashed up these two things, the horror and the cuteness. So I took the text from the Hello Kitty collected storybook and Koji Suzuki's horror novel Ring. And this is the results of the experiment. So I've got 2 poems, Grudge Trip and Papa's Grief Wheels. And this will be my last 2 poems. Grudge Trip. Hello Kitty enjoyed executions. One day at school, she stabbed a hideous fax machine. When Hello Kitty returned home from school, Mama appeared as a grotesque figure and showed her an aroused demon she'd received in the mail. Hello Kitty had won a night of entwined limbs, some orgasm beers, and a trip to America. She invited her friends to come along. The first stop was New York City, where Hello Kitty and her friends survived on occult arts in cotton candy. Next up was Nantucket, where Hello Kitty admired the cuts and violent heavings. Then Florida, which was full of decay and menace. The next stop was Vermont, where there were enemies and erupting brains. Hawaii was last, where Hello Kitty learned how to play Russian roulette and creep herself. When Hello Kitty arrived home, she told Mama and Mimi that it was their time to die. Papa's Grief Wheels. Hello Kitty loved autopsies. Papa looked up from his fear rituals and suggested they spend the day together, but what should they do? Hello Kitty thought of all the things she liked best. Should they die with a look of astonishment on their faces? No, they did that last week. Should they play Friday the 13th scenario? No. Hello Kitty decided they should unravel Hanya, a female demon. She asked Papa to teach her how to get away from something horrible, slowly but surely advancing. Hello Kitty wrote some mysterious riddle for Mama and her sister Mimi. Papa and Hello Kitty walked, twitching and choking. Papa found the gags and the escaped germs. There were so many to choose from. When they got to the funeral, Papa showed Hello Kitty how to hold the fist-sized mask. He tossed the shards of glass to her. Hello Kitty swung and hit the utterly abhorrent face contorted with terror. Next they played Set the Wheels of Grief in Motion. Papa threw eyelids to Hello Kitty and she caught them. Hello Kitty and Papa played nightmares until it was time for lunch. Then they each had a virus and a victim. They took their places, immersed in darkness. When Death pitched the ball to Hello Kitty, she ran it out of the park. Hello Kitty hit a home run. Hooray! Papa asked Hello Kitty, did that nasty demon scare you? Hello Kitty shook and enjoyed sudden heart failure. What a wonderful way to spend the day. Thank you very much.